She can really sing. Screwed up eyes and screwed down hairdo. Take you home. Take your passport.
They say it happened on the biggest night of the year, the night where legends meet legends, where lights flash, champagne flows, and the cameras never blink. The Grammy Awards, the temple of fame and ego, where careers are crowned and sometimes destroyed, and that's where the story begins. A rumor that refuses to die, the night David Bowie humiliated Barry Gibb of the Bee Gees. For decades it's been whispered between fans, reshared in dark corners of the internet, and retold in YouTube videos with grainy photos and eerie music. Each version changes slightly, but the ending is always the same. Bowie, the cool art rock shapeshifter, humiliates Barry Gibb, the shining falsetto of disco, under the hot lights of the Grammys. Some say it was a cutting remark, something like, "Real singers don't need to hide behind harmonies." Others claim it was worse, that Bowie mocked Barry's high-pitched voice right before presenting an award, leaving Gibb standing speechless. One account even insists Barry tried to laugh it off but couldn't hide the flicker of pain in his eyes, and that the cameras quickly cut away to avoid the awkwardness. The rumor feels cinematic, it feels real, it's the kind of story that makes perfect sense. Two icons, one stage, and a single moment that turned admiration into embarrassment. But here's the strange thing. If you look for that footage, it's nowhere. No tape, no transcript, no record in Grammy archives, not even a still photo of Bowie and Gibb together. It's as if the whole thing never happened. And yet the internet swears it did. Reddit threads debate which year it took place. Some claim 1980, others say 1983, or even the early 2000s. There's no consensus, but there's passion, because to many, this rumor isn't just gossip, it's symbolic. Bowie, the avant-garde genius; Gibb, the mainstream hitmaker; rock versus disco, cool versus commercial, art versus popularity. It's a cultural collision that feels inevitable, even if the evidence doesn't exist, and that's what keeps people watching, sharing, and wondering. Because when a story fits our idea of how history should have gone, we stop asking if it really did. There's something magnetic about the thought of Bowie, the man who reinvented himself with every decade, crossing paths with Barry Gibb, the man who stayed true to melody, harmony, and heartache. Two different worlds orbiting the same musical sun, and according to the rumor, they finally collided in front of millions. You can almost picture it, the Grammys, sometime in the late 1970s or early 1980s. Bowie walks onto the stage, poised, smirking, dressed like a glittering alien. Barry Gibb stands a few feet away, long hair shining under the lights, the sound of disco still echoing through the air from Stayin' Alive. And Night Fever. Bowie looks his way. The crowd waits. Then comes the comment. Short, sharp, unforgettable. The audience laughs nervously. Barry forces a smile, and from that moment, their paths are never the same. It's a powerful image, the perfect blend of ego, art, and tragedy. But power doesn't equal proof. When you peel back the layers, the story becomes foggy. Who first said it? No one knows. When did it appear online? Sometime in the mid-2000s, when music gossip channels started turning rumor into content. One early blog claimed Bowie had humiliated the Bee Gees at a Grammy after-party, calling them the safest men in music. Another version appeared on a fan forum where a user swore their uncle worked in television and saw it happen live. But like all internet legends, no one could ever verify it. Still, fans argued endlessly. Some said Bowie was jealous of the Bee Gees' commercial dominance in the late 1970s. Others claimed Barry was the one who started it, mocking Bowie's eccentric style in a backstage interview. But no interviews exist, no statements, nothing from either camp. Yet the myth survived, passed down from comment sections to TikToks, from reaction videos to conspiracy threads. Because deep down, fans love tension between their heroes. It humanizes them. It makes gods look mortal. And in the world of classic rock and disco, ego was always half the story. So why did people cling to this one? Because it represents a moment that could have happened. Bowie, standing for experimentation. Gibb, standing for perfection. Both brilliant, both fragile, both haunted by fame. The idea that these two men who shaped music in completely different ways might have collided in a single cruel moment, it's irresistible. The rumor became less about truth and more about what people wanted to believe. Because let's face it, the 1970s and 1980s were built on rivalries: rock versus disco, punk versus glam, MTV stars versus real musicians. And when you're choosing sides, you want a story that proves your hero was the real one. That's what this rumor became. Not a memory, but a mirror, a reflection of how fans see their idols: flawed, fiery, larger than life. And so the story lived on, shared in every Did You Know video, every Reddit comment, every nostalgic Facebook post that begins with, "Remember when Bowie embarrassed Barry Gibb?" It became folklore, music's version of an urban myth. And like all good myths, it was never about what really happened. It was about what people needed to believe. But what if the truth is something entirely different? What if Bowie and Barry Gibb weren't rivals at all, but two men who never even met, their names twisted by time, their legacies tangled in a rumor that refuses to fade? To understand why millions believe that David Bowie once humiliated Barry Gibb, you have to step back into the late 1970s, a decade defined by sound, style, and ego. Disco ruled the charts. Rock was fighting for its soul. And in between stood two men who embodied those worlds better than anyone else. Barry Gibb was untouchable. With Stayin' Alive, Night Fever, and How Deep Is Your Love, the Bee Gees had become the soundtrack of the planet.
How deep is your love? Is your love? How deep is your love?
Every car radio, every dance floor, every neon-lit bar echoed their harmonies. They weren't just famous, they were inescapable. But fame cuts both ways. When disco peaked, backlash wasn't far behind. Disco sucks wasn't just a slogan, it was a movement. To some, the Bee Gees represented everything wrong with pop: polished, pretty, and safe. And that's where Bowie comes in. David Bowie was everything Barry Gibb wasn't: mysterious, unpredictable, avant-garde. He reinvented himself with every album. Ziggy Stardust,
Now Ziggy play guitar, jamming good with weird and killing.
The Thin White Duke, the Berlin Era, each one more daring than the last. Critics worshipped him. Rock fans saw him as the last rebel in a world that was turning plastic. So when someone whispered that Bowie had taken a jab at Barry Gibb on live television, the world didn't question it. They nodded, because it fit the narrative. It was more than gossip, it was validation. It confirmed what the rock crowd wanted to believe, that art had mocked commerce, that the visionary had exposed the pop star. And once that emotional logic clicked, truth didn't matter anymore. In the early 2000s, nostalgia for that era was exploding online. YouTube was filling up with grainy clips of the Grammys, old interviews of Bowie smirking through tricky questions, and Barry Gibb holding back tears during Bee Gees tributes. Somewhere in that haze of recycled footage and fan edits, the two legends began to share the same digital frame, even though in reality, they never did. One upload showed Bowie joking about disco being the new classical music. Another showed Barry accepting an award, visibly emotional. Someone edited them together, and suddenly a new moment was born. Bowie sneers, Barry looks hurt. Two clips, 2 decades apart, stitched into one supposed humiliation. Viewers believed it because it felt authentic. The tone, the expressions, the tension, all the ingredients of real drama were there, and when a rumor looks like a memory, it becomes one. But beneath the surface, something deeper was happening. People weren't just believing in a fake feud, they were reliving a cultural war. Disco and rock were more than sounds, they were identities. You didn't just listen to Bowie or the Bee Gees, you chose who you were, and in that invisible tug of war, stories like this became emotional ammunition. For rock fans, Bowie's supposed jab was proof that authenticity still mattered. For Bee Gees fans, the rumor was an insult, a wound to defend. And so, both sides kept the myth alive, each retelling sharpening the edges a little more. Even the idea of humiliation fit neatly into the story of both men's lives. Barry Gibb had been humiliated, not by Bowie, but by critics, by radio boycotts, by the collapse of disco's golden age. And Bowie, the eternal outsider, knew what it meant to be mocked too, for his sexuality, his costumes, his constant transformations. In a strange way, the rumor reflected their shared pain. Two men who had both faced public ridicule, now eternally bound in a story about it. And maybe that's why people believed it, because deep down, it wasn't about rivalry. It was about recognition. It let fans project their own nostalgia, their own heartbreak, their own need for heroes onto a single imagined night, a night that symbolized everything they loved and everything they lost. There's a saying in journalism, a false story dies when people stop wanting it to be true. But in music, the opposite is often the case. The most unbelievable stories survive because we need them. They fill the spaces between songs, the quiet after the final note fades, and so the rumor lived on, through comment sections, through fan debates, through headlines written to stir emotion, not accuracy. Every few years it resurfaces, a recycled clip, a dramatic title, a thumbnail of Bowie smirking beside Barry Gibb's solemn face. Each time, it pulls millions of views. Each time the truth slips a little further away, because by now, it's not really a rumor anymore. It's folklore, a modern myth born from pixels, nostalgia, and longing. But if you dig deep enough, beneath the noise, beneath the edits, beneath the decades of storytelling, you find something else, a truth that's quieter, simpler, and far more human. Here's the truth. Barry Gibb and David Bowie were never photographed together. Not once, not at the Grammys, not backstage, not even at a record label party. And according to Barry himself, they never even met. In one interview years later, he admitted, "I never met Bowie." I think he was very smart. He avoided being associated with anybody that didn't fit his image. Those words weren't bitter. They were reflective, respectful even, because by then, Barry knew exactly how fragile image could be, and that's the heart of this story. The rumor of humiliation didn't happen at all, but the feeling of humiliation, that was real. The real Grammy moment everyone remembers happened in 2003. Barry Gibb wasn't standing beside David Bowie that night. He was standing beside his surviving brother Robin. The Bee Gees had just lost Maurice Gibb, their heart and harmony, only weeks earlier. And that night, the Grammys were honoring them with the Legend Award, a moment that should have been triumphant, but instead felt like the world's most painful farewell. When Barry stepped to the microphone, you could see it in his eyes, the ache of memory, the weight of survival, the grief of being the one left to speak. The audience rose in silence. Some clapped, some just watched, moved unsure how to respond. Barry's voice cracked as he thanked the Recording Academy, he thanked the fans, and he thanked Maurice, his baby brother, saying, "We'd give anything if he were standing here tonight." Those words weren't rehearsed, they were raw, and in that moment, Barry wasn't a disco star or a legend. He was a man trying to keep his composure while the entire world watched him fall apart inside. And while Barry was grieving on that stage, David Bowie was thousands of miles away. That same year, Bowie was in New York, recording what would become his final major studio album, Reality.
Tragic youth who's looking young, sexy.
He wasn't at the Grammys, and he wasn't mocking anyone. In fact, Bowie had long since turned away from the public stage, preferring solitude, painting, and quiet reflection after decades of performing. The two men were living parallel lives, each dealing with time, loss, and legacy in their own way. And yet somewhere along the way, the internet rewrote that night into something it never was. If you watch the real footage from that Grammy ceremony, you'll see tears, not tension, a standing ovation, not ridicule, and a brother not humiliated but haunted. So why did people rewrite that moment into a humiliation? Because sometimes when we don't understand grief, we mistake vulnerability for weakness. We interpret emotion as embarrassment, and we confuse humanity for defeat. Barry Gibb wasn't humiliated, he was heartbroken, and that's the part that people often forget. It's almost poetic, isn't it? While the world imagined a battle of egos, the truth was that Bowie and Gibb were both facing something far deeper, the fading of time, the changing of music, and the quiet price of being human after fame. Barry stood under that spotlight, with tears in his eyes. Bowie stayed in his studio, pouring himself into songs like Bring Me the Disco King, a haunting, slow masterpiece that sounded more like a funeral dirge than a dance track.
Bring me the disco king. I don't know about you. I don't know.
Two men, worlds apart, each confronting the ghosts of their own careers, each saying goodbye in their own way. So no, David Bowie didn't humiliate Barry Gibb. Life did, time did, and the cruel way fame remembers things did. But there's something else here, something beautiful. Because in that same 2003 Grammy moment, Barry Gibb didn't crumble. He stood tall, trembling but proud, proving that legends don't fade, they endure. And David Bowie, far away, was doing the same, accepting that the spotlight doesn't define you and that art can still whisper long after applause has stopped. Two icons, two very different paths, and one misunderstood story, twisted by rumor but redeemed by truth. Every rumor has a birthplace, but unlike a song, it doesn't start in a studio, it starts in a whisper. For this one, that whisper likely began on the internet sometime in the early 2000s, when message boards and fan sites ruled before social media. Back then, nostalgia was currency. People were rediscovering the Bee Gees and David Bowie through low-resolution clips, scanned magazine photos, and old televised performances uploaded to sites with shaky audio. The past was being digitized, but not verified, and that's when the story appeared. A nameless post on a now-defunct forum claimed that David Bowie once mocked Barry Gibb's falsetto live at the Grammys. The user never gave a year, never cited footage, but the phrasing was perfect, short, scandalous, and easy to believe. It spread like wildfire. Within months, the quote resurfaced in comment sections under random Grammy videos, then on early YouTube clips titled Bowie vs. Bee Gees, The Feud You Never Saw. Each new version added its own little twist. One claimed Bowie rolled his eyes while presenting an award. Another said Barry walked off stage visibly upset. No one asked where the footage was, because the internet even then preferred sensation over certainty. By the mid-2010s, the story had evolved into a full-blown legend. Video essay channels chasing clicks began dramatizing the supposed confrontation. Stock footage from different years, different decades, was stitched together to create the illusion of a single night. A Bowie smirk from the 1975 Soul Train Awards, a Gibb reaction shot from the 2003 Grammys, a voiceover saying, "And in that moment Barry realized he'd been humiliated." It was perfect YouTube alchemy, nostalgia, drama, and heartbreak wrapped into 10 sensational minutes. The title alone was enough. David Bowie destroys Barry Gibb live. People clicked, people shared, and before long the line between myth and memory blurred completely. But beneath the viral buzz, something deeper was at work, the psychology of mythmaking. Every generation romanticizes its idols. And when those idols represent opposite forces, like Bowie and Gibb, rock and disco, chaos and order, we invent stories to make them collide. Because in our minds, confrontation makes the past feel alive again. Think about it. The 1970s were the decade of extremes: flamboyance, rebellion, hedonism, and heartbreak. To imagine Bowie and Gibb clashing was to relive the energy of that era, to see two titans wrestle for the soul of popular music. Even if it wasn't true, it felt emotionally right. And online, feeling is stronger than fact. By the late 2010s, artificial intelligence tools and deepfake audio started to make things worse. Clips surfaced of Bowie's voice saying lines he never spoke, subtly edited interviews that implied sarcasm or disdain toward disco culture. One even mixed his actual quote, "Disco, it's not my world, but it's got rhythm," with fake footage of Barry Gibb reacting in discomfort. To the casual viewer, it looked real, but what it really was artifice, a remix of memory, a new kind of fiction built out of nostalgia. And every time the clip resurfaced, it gathered new believers, people who swore they remembered watching it live. Memory is fragile. When enough people repeat a false story, the human brain starts to store it as truth. It's not deceit, it's wiring. Eventually, journalists tried to trace the story's origin, but by then, it had splintered into hundreds of different timelines. Some versions placed it in the late 1970s during disco's peak, others in the 1980s, when Bowie released Let's Dance. Some even claimed it happened in 2003, the very year the Bee Gees received their Legend Award. But in every case, the details fell apart. Different outfits, different hosts, different eras entirely. It was like chasing a ghost made of pixels. Yet even as the rumor unraveled, fans didn't stop sharing it, because at its core, the story wasn't about evidence, it was about identity. For rock fans, it was a declaration. Bowie, the pure artist, unafraid to speak his mind. For disco fans, it was an injustice, another example of the world misunderstanding Barry Gibb's genius. In the end, Both sides loved the story for the same reason. It made their heroes human. And maybe that's the quiet tragedy here. The truth that there was no humiliation, no feud, no dramatic night felt too simple, too gentle for a culture addicted to conflict. But for those who look closer, the truth is far more poetic. While the world imagined confrontation, both men were writing their final chapters in peace. Barry Gibb was honoring his brother's legacy, keeping the Bee Gees' name alive through charity, tributes, and solo music. David Bowie was quietly preparing his last artistic statements the next day.
And the next day, and the next, and another day, here I
And later Black Star, reflections on mortality and meaning.
can't answer why. Just go with.
Neither man ever spoke of rivalry, neither threw shade, and neither needed to, because true legends don't compete, they coexist. Still, the internet never forgets. The fake video is still out there, the comments still debate it, and somewhere, someone still believes David Bowie humiliated Barry Gibb that night. But now you know the truth, and sometimes, that's the only way to honor the legends we claim to love, by giving them back their dignity.